You have given me feedback a couple of times, and the first time I was like, okay, but then they were really useful and helpful, and pointing at blind spots and things that I could. When you give feedback at the right time in the right tone of voice, and the intention is good, then it's very, very powerful. It's actually a gift.
So for me, leading is about three things. Or the third thing is the leading thing. But the other two things are, first, I do need to understand where I currently stand. It's called A, right? So this is how I am, where I am, my strengths, my weaknesses, my preferences, my values.
So welcome to another episode of Love Not Fear podcast. This again is a guest podcast, and I'm really honored to have on the show Michael Portz. Michael, welcome.
Eduard. Thank you, Eduard. So nice to be with you today. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's an honor.
Where are you right now so people can trace you on the map?
Well, I am right now in my office, and my office is in a small town in Germany.
Okay.
The town's name is Erkelenz, which could also be mistaken to be a Pokemon, but it's not. It's Erkelenz, and it's right on the border to the Netherlands. So I'm quite close to you.
That's good. Okay, next time we do it live. Now, Michael and I met a couple of years ago, and the conversations go literally everywhere. So it's. I hope this is going to be as fun as we normally have in real life. It is to write an intro for you. I could make tons of jokes, but what really defines you that you have a career as a hardcore businessman. You are a gifted musician, and you are a passionate coach and trainer for startup entrepreneurs. So, which label are you most proud of?
Well, what you're saying sounds like a wonderful story, so I'll take it. I have a motto, and maybe it encompasses all three things. My life is colorful. And I have been told that if I say that in English, that having a colorful past means something else. So I haven't done jail time yet. And I do have a colorful past, and I do take pride from doing different things that seemingly have no direct connection. I enjoy that.
Yeah, but you have a way to blend it in anyway. So I guess if you are doing a talk, you are going to at some point sit behind a piano and sing, and yeah, there's always a twist to that. Another thing that really defines you, that you are verbally very precise, and you make me bring out the best of my vocabulary. So when I'm talking to you, I use words that I normally don't do because I try to be precise as well. So that's very nice. Razor sharp with words, I wrote down. So thank you.
Oh wow! I'll take it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, and two more, and then the floor is yours. Two phrases that come when I look at you. I always hear: "Eat your own dog food." So you have to tell about the dog food story and the chief thing. You love chiefs. I guess something in your childhood was around chiefs and Indians. So what is that all about?
I'll start with the dog food, and the two are related. So the expression "eating your own dog food" is an expression that I learned quite late in my, as you call it so nicely, English vocabulary. And it's an interesting expression, and I believe it comes from the United States. It was taught to me by a former boss of mine, Graham, who was Australian. And the short answer is, it's all about authenticity. So eating your own dog food is about authenticity. It's doing what I say. It's if I preach water, I cannot drink wine. So all these things, eating your own dog food, and it comes from if I have a business that makes dog food, At least that's how I explain the slogan. If I have a business that makes dog food, then, well, I got to be eating that dog food myself if I'm serious about what I'm selling. Or at least give it to my dogs at home and not buy other people's dog foods to give it to my dogs. So it's practice what I preach. And for me, that is about authenticity. Yeah. And the first time this came up when Graham explained it to me was, we were starting a company in the Middle East. And the company was about mobile telephony. And we were a new entrant in the market, challenging the incumbent. Kind of like we had it here in Germany, and I think similar in the Netherlands and many other countries. There was one incumbent, the good old country state-owned operator, and then the challenger brands come in. So we were a challenger brand. We didn't have a good network. Our network was shit in the beginning. And at some point, this is when my boss said, our network is not good, and now we have to get rid of our competitors' SIM cards and telephone numbers, because if people see that we're using the network of the competition, of the incumbent that we are here to challenge, then that hugely discredits us. And that made immediate sense. And from this day, the phrase, eat your own dog food, has stuck with me because it's so important about credibility and authenticity. And I'm glad you're associating that phrase with me now. Graham would be proud, I hope.
Well, you told about that period in your life in Qatar, which was really in a completely remote, a new environment for you, pushing quite a salesy agenda, and you come across as a man with many talents. I cannot see you in the suit and tie selling telephone subscriptions. So how's that?
Handyverkäufer, as we say in Deutsch. A mobile phone salesman. At that time, I wasn't wearing suits and ties. I was wearing probably suit pants, though, and shirts, and an occasional jacket. And yes, there was a phase in my life and my career where I did wear suits and ties. By the way, I just remember I owe you the answer to the second question about the chief thing. We'll get back to that. So on the suit and tie, I can remember there was a time in early adulthood at about age 20, coming out of school or out of uni later, my mid to late 20s, when I had said I will never ever work in a company where I need to wear a suit and tie. And then I got my diploma and looked at getting a job, and I started in a consulting firm. And what was expected? The suit and tie. And I put on the suit and tie. And now I understand that was a first sign of that I actually can be flexible, even if I'm quite set in my opinions sometimes. I like to have strong opinions, and I also love flexibility. So I put on the suit and tie for a while. And then after a while, I saw how the big partner, the senior partner in that firm, was wearing slacks and more casual shirts than all the rest of us. I started buying the same kind, the chino kind of pants, those beige sort of. And then my colleagues were all laughing and said, "Oh, Michael, you look like you came straight from the golf course." And I thought, well, that's okay. If that's your image in your head, have it. And it's much more comfortable than sitting here in the suit. So I changed as quickly as I could.
Okay. And then let's circle back to the chief. Where did that come from?
I'm glad I had a few minutes to think about this unconsciously, because I really like the question, and it taps into something from my childhood. I have had a need, maybe, or a desire to lead. So I wanted to lead. I wanted to be the guy who is, not managing, but leading, who is the leader of the pack, who is charging forward. So there was something that identified with early on, and it didn't quite work. I remember one of my first attempts as a teenager at leadership was to become the class speaker of my class in school. And I thought, being in politics and being the class speaker, that's an honor, and to do that. And I wanted to lead. And I've never done that after again. I learned early on that bribes don't work because I handed out candy bars to buy votes to the kids in my class, and I got an awful lot of shit for it, of course, and rightly so. And it that definitely fixed my bearings. And from there, it was clear it needs to be authentic, and I cannot buy into this. So from that time on, it was clear to me I have got something to learn to deserve to lead and to be given that responsibility. So that was my association when you asked about why is the word chief important. And then, of course, I do work, and we have a leadership program that's called Chief of the Year. So the idea of leadership and leading and a chief, or being a boss or having a boss, to me, it's important because I've long seen a need for that. It's clear when, who is in charge, and that it's important to have someone in charge so that a group is not disoriented and chaotic. And I might be wrong. Maybe chaos and disorientation is a good thing.
But how do you lead yourself?
I would say that's a great question. How do I lead myself? First answer that comes to mind is more and more as I grow older. So I would say that early in my life, my self-leadership at times was poor even. And I had a poor command of myself. As I grow older, I see how that more and more happens. Even in tricky situations, I can leave myself better now. I'm 53, and man, that has been a learning journey to lead myself. It's maybe the journey.
What does leading mean? What does it entail? Taking more time to reflect, taking more time to digest, taking more time to educate yourself, to read, or mindfulness? What is in the mix?
So for me, leading is about three things. Or the third thing is the leading thing. But the other two things are, first, I do need to understand where I currently stand. It's called A. Right? So this is how I am, where I am, my strengths, my weaknesses, my preferences, my values, my beliefs. There's lots of insights about myself that help me to be clear about where I stand in life. The second thing I need before I can talk about leadership is a clarity about what my goal is, where I'm going, what's my B, my destination. And even if my destination is the same as my current position, that just means that I don't want to move, but I still have a goal, which is to stay where I am. Now, usually in my life, it has been the case that I want to move. I want to get ahead. I want somewhere else. I want to make something out of my life. And the word lead comes in when it is about having a clear direction and an easy way. For me, it's about easiness. And it doesn't have to be there for everyone, I realize. But for me, it's about easily getting from A to B.
Why should it be easy?
Why? I choose so. Choice. Well, let me rephrase. I wish to get from A to B in my life at ease.
Knowing from where you are, what are signals for you that tell you that you are in a place where you shouldn't be? What happens in your head?
Are many moments when I lose my temper, when I get edgy, when I get irritated, whenever I am triggered.
Does it have a physical response as well? Do you get ill in certain situations? Does your body tell you things?
I can definitely feel my pulse go up. I can feel that my breathing gets different. I usually get a louder voice.
Yeah, but this is in the moment. I'm talking more about a period, about reflecting and then noticing that you need to move from where you are. You have this methodology to do a check-in with yourself, and you broke it down into three parts. And then I'm circling back to the first one to say, okay, getting a reading of where you are, and I'm really interested in that. Maybe is there something I can learn to check if I am where I want to be, need to be, should be?
Sure. Okay, there's a bunch of elements. And I think you're talking about the Vierklang concept with the purpose, vision, values, and strategies. Is that right?
Correct.
Right. Okay. Now I'm with you. Sorry, I took a moment to catch up. So to know where I am and where I want to go, there's a whole number of tools and instruments, and I call them leadership tools. And a lot of them are about leading myself. So one leadership tool that I have found useful in my life for the past 16 years, and I learned it from the same guy I learned the dog food phrase from. He was very influential on me. And the more time passes, the more I realize how big the influence was. He was a great teacher. And so the tool that I learned to use, and I use it at least once a year, twice a year, and I look at it almost every day, is that I regularly reflect on my master plan, on the life that I want to live, or also, nice word of the word lead, the life I want to lead. And the life I want to lead, I use this simple model that has 4 elements in it, hence the word Vierklang, which is a musical chord with 4 notes. I love music. And it contains of purpose, which is wherefore I do what I do. The second element is vision, which is where am I going, or where have I got in 5 years' time if things went ridiculously well, preferably. My values that guide me in my behavior and what's truly important to me. And then the last thing is what's called strategies, which is what I do to get closer to my vision, in line with my values, and to fulfill my purpose in the world. And it's a simple model with 3 circles and a heart at their intersection. And I've been using that since 2008, which is now almost 16 years. I use it for my life, for my personal life. I mean, the thing, it's the 3 circles and the heart and the visual shape. I'm a visual guy, so it helps me to have something that I can look at. And the beauty of it is it answers the big questions in life. Why am I here? Where am I going? How do I want to behave? And what am I going to do?
Were you inspired by Ikigai for this, or was this Ikigai was later popular, right? This is before Ikigai, I guess.
I learned about Ikigai about 5-6 years after learning about that Vierklang model. But probably Ikigai, in fairness, I think it has been around for longer, being Japanese, ancient old culture. It could be said that the Vierklang model is a simplification of Ikigai. And I love Ikigai, and I have used it. And I'm a simple guy. I can deal with 4 elements. Ikigai has 4 circles intersecting, and then each of the intersections means something, and the zone in the middle is the Ikigai. Yeah, exactly. So it's that also I find useful. It's just a little bit complex for me to hold it in my head and know it by heart every day.
This Graham, this mentor of yours, came up a couple of times. What was it that you learned from him? And why is he still keep on giving or telling you things?
Yeah. Well, so I had gotten to Qatar in the Middle East to start a company for a big corporate. So a startup for a major brand, a telco operator. And we didn't have a CEO. I wasn't clear on what my role was going to be, but somebody suggested, Michael, this is a great opportunity. Do you want to go? And I was crazy enough to say, oh yeah, Middle East, I know nothing of it. I have never started a company. And you want me to do marketing and do commercial stuff? Great. I don't know anything about that either. So I'll go because there's lots to learn. I love when I learn. So I like a new challenge. I love to learn and grow. So this was perfect. I arrived and there was chaos. 20 people like me, all eager to prove themselves and to achieve something big, and no leadership because there was no CEO. So one day, Fran Hansen, the HR lady at the time, said, we have finally found a CEO and you're going to love him. Okay, I said, yes, ma'am, I will. So why should I love him? Well, because he's a true people person. And he's very different to all the other CEOs I have worked with. And I think you guys will get along really well. So I was, looking forward to meet this man. And he showed up and he was different from moment one. Talking about suit and tie, I saw him wear a tie once when he met the emir, the equivalent of the king of the country. And the king laughed at him and said, I know that you don't wear ties. You don't have to wear one for me. Because Graham was famous for coming to work and anywhere in his kind of washed out black jeans and a t-shirt and whatever regular leather shoes. And that was that. And then maybe a jacket on top. And so he showed up at the first meeting. He took off his shoes. That was a tick of his. And we are similar in that because I always have warm feet. So he took off his shoes in the first meeting. I thought, this guy is good. He has the same problem that I have. He has hot feet all the time. And stood in front of 25 people in the company who had all arrived months before he did. And that was a big leadership moment. So he walks up to the flip chart. He had it prepared. And he flips the page and says, this is how we're going to run this company. And he draws that image with the 3 circles and the heart, with purpose, vision, values, and strategies. It's all going to come down to that. And if you're willing to go on this journey on that basis, you can stay. If you don't, you can leave. Wow. And I was sitting there in my seat. I know exactly where it was, what the light was, the time of day, the room, the location, everything. It was a moment that stuck because it was so focused and so intense. And I looked up to the sky and I said, dear universe or dear God or whatever it is, thank you for sending this guy because this is going to be interesting. I can learn something. And then that continued. And the thing about Graham was in how he was announced, the reputation that preceded him was that he was a true people person and that he was different. And the different part I could immediately identify with because I always have been different. There were many times in my life where I did not fit in. And at times that was challenging for me because I felt as an outsider. Now I know that it's sort of strength and I can use it in a way to contribute even to a group. And but the other part about being a people person, I thought, oh shit, that's what I am not, or not yet. And I could feel a great interest learning from this guy and understanding. I thought it was a compliment of the highest order for somebody to be called a person of the people, a people person. It's like, wow, for somebody to say that before anything else, he's successful, he's rich, he's famous, whatever. He's a people person. That was intriguing. And so what I then spent was the next almost 4 years before he sadly and suddenly passed away to understand and make sense of what that meant, being a people person. And I'm still making sense of it now, some 15 and a half years later. And this is the focus of my work and of my life as a professional now, is all about people skills and how to be a successful people person, because I find this more important than anything else.
If you go into your website and there's people person written all over it, so I guess you got pretty far. You made your habit, you made it habitual. You made it the core of everything you do, and you even wrote 2 books about it. Tell the audience how you got an extremely clever way of writing your first book. It's also a very lazy one.
That's a very polite way to put it. Others say it's a very lazy way of writing a book. I would say it was getting from A to B at ease. So the first book, I wrote it together with my dear friend, colleague, co-author, and buddy, Christian Kohlhoff. Who's also an entrepreneur, also has done some really cool work, and also has a passion for people skills and for leadership, and is also a great people person, I find. And when COVID hit, at that time, we already both of us had turned coaches. So we were ex-entrepreneurs running businesses, investing in businesses, who got clearer at that time about that we want to really help others. And that's what is called a coach. And a coach is somebody who helps people from A to B in my simple model of the world. And so we were sitting there at COVID going, well, there's no coaching happening at the moment because we can't travel, we can't go anywhere. And over the phone and Zoom, it did exist a little bit for one-on-one relationships, but not for groups and teams, which is what we were doing. So we sat back and, well, what do we do with our time now? We were using Riverside, by the way, also for our work and other platforms, Whereby and whatnot. And Christian was keen on doing a podcast, which we had started just a couple of months before COVID hit. And I followed him. I wasn't too keen on doing it. He's a big podcaster and podcast listener. I'm not really. I love music, but podcasts, So, but I went along with it. And then we sat down, it was in April, and said, we have nothing to do. Let's record everything we know about leadership that has inspired us, that has worked for us. And then after that, we just press play once a week and all these podcast episodes go out. So we got together April after Easter, I believe, and started recording in sessions like this. And, the technology was already there where that could be done in high definition. Before we had met in person to record our podcast, now we were doing it remote, and we were just cracking on. We had 4-5 podcast episodes we recorded a day. And within a month, we had 50 or 55 episodes recorded and enough material to publish for a year. And we went, whoo, that was cool. We're done. This was great. And we really got in good form because, doing this all the time gave us a great routine and an ability to focus and move ahead. And then we had that finish. And, well, what are we going to do now? And he asked me, well, what do you want to do? I said, I always wanted to write a book, and maybe that's the time to write a book. And he went, oh, yeah, it's a good idea. Let's write a book together. And then we started. And it was not at ease. It was painful. And
this story is directly the reason why I called David. And I asked him, David, where are you on writing a book? He said, I've got some ideas. So I reversed engineered it. I said, let's do a podcast in order to get the book. So I took your idea. Not really keen on the format. You literally jot it down, and then there's this fun part where you are directed, so to say, by was it Leonie that in the end, she takes a step away and then reflects back on what happened in the conversation. It is very very easy book to read and to lay away and just open it and read it somewhere else. I can highly recommend it. It's and also the podcast. The podcasts are in German, and my German is quite basic, but you guys are so eloquent that I could even understand your German podcast. So well done.
We do have a few episodes in English, by the way, and we have coming out the entire Chief of the Year book as an audiobook in English.
Okay, nice.
Coming soon. That will be it is already out. It is on some audiobook platforms already, and I think it's coming to Audible shortly.
And the other book?
And
the feedback?
The feedback book came later, and that was different. Can I tell you one or two more things about the first one, how we got to the book? Because you mentioned a few things there that could be interesting to hear for others. So we had the podcast, and it wasn't as easy as then just getting that transcribed. With now can be done with an AI in minutes or hours. For us, it was a bit harder. We had to commission it, find somebody on Upwork or Fiverr, one of those platforms, and get it translated. And that was a ton of work. And to get it transcribed and then translated, we published in 4 languages. And the thing that came out of it, one was we did it as a dialogue. And we made the excuse, well, if Plato can do it in ancient Greece, then why can't we? And, well, okay, forgive my arrogance. I'm not Plato. Well, we had a dialogue, and we published it as in dialogue form. The other thing is that in coaching, everything is a dialogue between the coachee and the coach. And there's a lot of asking questions and answers. And mentoring is the act of sharing experiences, which is all we were doing. So we were not processing third-party knowledge and sharing that. We were sharing our own experiences with the knowledge that we had applied. And so, we arrived in a place where we got to, it really makes a lot of sense for us to publish a book with dialogues of us sharing experience. But we needed one more thing, and that was what Leonie brought in. Initially, she was our ghostwriter to help put our loose podcast babbling into proper readable language, because there is a big gap. And she did that artfully. And then, because she was very interested in the subject and also keen on growing her leadership toolbox, we asked her to summarize what she had taken out of every of the 55 or so chapters. And that's the blurb in the end. And that's really where the processing starts, and where we wanted to already start the processing that might happen in the mind of the reader. So anyway, so that was our thoughts in the concept. The second book was totally different.
Yeah, it is. There's one more comment on the book. It was the only book in that format I've ever written, so I was not familiar with the format, and I could see myself like be on your side for a while. Then Christian added something like, "Oh yeah, but now I'm more Christian." So I felt like I'm a part of the conversation. So I was wearing two hats. Now I'm more of this and that. So that's quite engaging. Of course, I'm interested in the topic as well. And yeah, as a remark on the book, the Leonie's part, I had to look up what was happening. So it wasn't immediately clear from the beginning what was that. So I was kind of confused, but maybe I was lazy and skipped the first episode that explains it.
That's the introduction. There's an explanation on what her role is. The role of the observer. So if a third person was sitting in the room listening to the conversation, which is also a good coaching concept, and part of coaching education is two people have the coaching conversation, same therapy, and there is an observer in the room who listens to the conversation and later shares what they observed. It's a perspective, also called the fly on the wall or the CCTV camera that's observing. And that's where we were coming from with that. It's called the triad conversation.
And before we dive right into the topic of the second book, the feedback, why is feedback so important for you? Because you're quite meticulously in feedback.
I hated it. Well, that's a strong word. I couldn't quite relate to it. And it was, I have been part of so much leadership development and education, and I've always enjoyed that. And when it came to the issue of feedback and all the feedback techniques and the so-called feedback sandwich, which I now call a shit sandwich.
You have given me feedback a couple of times. And the first time I was like, okay. But then they were really useful and helpful and pointing at blind spots and things that I could. When you give feedback at the right time, in the right tone of voice, and the intention is good, then it's very, very powerful. It's actually a gift.
Yeah. That's how it should be. And I thank you. I'm glad to hear that in some cases it worked, because I know that I had many cases in the past where I wouldn't even call feedback, where I stated an opinion and didn't help to get to a better outcome than if we had reached with me shutting up. And, so I was coming from an experience where I felt insecure about feedback and not sure if it's really useful. And I always had a funny feeling. And then to make matters worse, being a leadership coach, of course, there is feedback on the curriculum, because it is an act that is necessary sometimes to tell other people my opinion to lead to a certain result. And so it became more and more important to me to get it right. And I was stressed. We had just launched our remote leadership program, Chief of the Year. And we had a session with 120 people in the session that I knew were coming. And 5 days before that session, I was getting really nervous because on the agenda on that day was feedback. And I thought, gosh, I'm going to have to stand in front of these 120 people on Zoom. Yeah. This was at the height of COVID. I'm going to stand in front of 120 people and I'm going to talk about feedback. And I cannot, in all seriousness, I couldn't eat my own dog food. Right? I can't. This was not my dog food that I was dishing out, and I was thinking, oh, man, I got to approach this differently, and maybe we're going to have a discussion instead, and people can voice their experiences rather than me sharing techniques that I didn't quite believe in or not had the right frame of reference. And then something remarkable happened. I woke up at 4 a.m. with a sense of eureka. Since then, I know what a eureka moment is, where you go, eureka. And I woke up at 4, I was like, gosh, I had an epiphany in my sleep. I was dreaming. I was so stressed about this thing that I was dreaming about it. And even the nights before. And then I woke up at 4 a.m. and I sat down and I started putting the pieces of the puzzle together, while feedback was puzzling me. And I could see the structure for the first time, what then became the second book, which is called The 6 Situations of Feedback, of which 3 situations truly are feedback situations, and the other 3 situations are traps. And if I fall into those, I make it worse. And that got clear to me that night, when a conversation is about feedback, when it's about something else, and when I better shut up.
You have an interesting way of giving non-verbal feedback, including some tools you put on the table. That is pretty interesting. Can you tell us about that?
Tell me which ones you're talking about.
The red card, the you hinting on reaching for red and green card, and you have a couple of tools that you used in EO forums that could be very beneficial in a management meeting as well. Because when you put the eye, the gestalt, reaching for it is often enough to like, oh no, okay, my bad. So that's quite funny. Yeah.
It's there is a concept in coaching or in helping groups that's called a pattern disruptor. A pattern disruptor is, well, it obviously disrupts a pattern that's going on. So say a group of people is working together, maybe a management team, and then the negative spiral begins, right? And as an outsider, I can probably see that a little bit earlier than the people that are in the group. And then I have a choice as the coach in the room. I don't always intervene, but there is a time when it's right to make an intervention and to go, look, guys, I think you're in a pattern and you're spiraling down and it's not really helpful. I wouldn't put it like this. I would ask questions, of course. And one way that I found is to do something that is different and that literally interrupts people in their tracks and kind of gets their attention and focus away. Other people throw around like a golden banana, or bring a football in there, or have a code word, and when the code word is said, everybody has to stand up and run around like chicken, whatever it is. So and it can be funny and it can be a bit crazy because it really needs to disrupt what's going on. And so these cards were born out of that idea. So when in a situation, when a conversation is going on, disruption is not always a good thing. Often it's not a helpful thing. So the question became, how can I interrupt the pattern that's going on in a very non-intrusive way that is not aggressive? And that's how these cards came up. And what I'm holding up into the camera now for those listening is a nice pinkish red card with a huge letter written on it that says I, for I, like me. And it has some words crossed out, which are the words you and the words one. That's one of the pattern interrupter cards that I use. And like you said, I didn't foresee this coming. When I started bringing this into group meetings, just putting the card on the table. And at some point in the conversation, somebody starts reaching forward. The person who's violating the rules of the engagement with their behavior already goes, okay, I know. I'll speak, I know.
It's sort of a Pavlov reaction. So this is the Love Not Fear podcast, right? Knowing you will have given it some thought of why I invited you on this podcast.
Yeah. I have an idea, and I'd like to share that I love the Love Not Fear concept logo from day one. When I first I think saw it on David's T-shirt or whatever he had. Yeah, there you go, on the laptop. Yeah, right there with the heart in there. And I relate also to the heart because I use the heart a lot for purpose work, for the Vierklang model where the heart is at the center. So when I see a heart, I smile because it's a beautiful symbol, right? And it's about at core. It's about the core of a person, of a being. Which is where core value comes from, because cœur in French means core, heart. So I related to that concept immediately and to the concept of love, of course. And, you guys use negative language with not fear, and I get it. And, on my card, I would even cross that out because all the negative stuff I cross out or I cross through or I strike through and I give it an extra touch to make sure that the negative language disappears.
You're a big hippie. So you have the new Volkswagen electric hippie van. You're taking it. Come on, we this is a podcast mostly for entrepreneurs. So let's be clear on what we don't want. So is not a bad thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's all about the people, right? There's the hippie thought. And I do believe that success in life and in business really comes down to being all about the people. And people have something at their core that we all have and we cannot get rid of, even if we wanted to. And it's also the one thing that I think is for quite a while going to massively distinct us from any artificial intelligence that might be coming soon. And that is emotions. As a human being, we have emotions. They are part of the stem, the reptile brain, the amygdala, which are tiny little buggers in the center of the brain that cause all this commotion called emotion. Yeah, and emotions, I learned, are a reaction that is not controllable. Feelings are something else. Feeling is a prefrontal cortex, so the big brain function, that makes sense of what's going on emotionally. Emotions come from the center, from the reptile brain. They cannot be controlled. If I feel fear, and that's what's in your title, it's there. And the thing that I learned is I got to accept it, realize it, but bring it up into my consciousness, reflect on it, and then I can make a different decision how I respond to the situation that I'm in. Big distinction between reacting and responding.
That's what all the podcasts are about, in to get a hold of this concept, to play with it, to be able to grab it and dunk it and spin it around, and zoom out and zoom back in. And see, and because fear is loud. It's making you do a lot, making you don't do a lot of things. So it's by giving that attention, it's very, very interesting.
What resonates so much with me about your concept is I have had so many times in my life where I was fearful, and when I look back at and I mean, almost literally times where I shed my pants. And that's fear. Fear can become that physical.
Yeah.
Hasn't happened. But, let's put this thought out of our minds quickly. But fear can be very dramatic. And for some people, fear is really hard. And I have had some really hard times in my life where I was fearful, and probably not all situations, but in some I managed to overcome that fear. And love, of course, is the ultimate destination from a state of fear to get to, because love means compassion, it means feeling with other people, it means emotional intelligence, and it means unconditional love especially is a very powerful tool how to deal with fear, especially when dealing with other people and even with myself. So there were many times in my life where I had fear and chose to overcome that, and it got me to a better place. And that the key word in that is courage. And the three famous psychologists. There is Freud, who kind of started the whole modern science, or modern, whatever, but the science of psychology. And then there was Carl Gustav Jung, who is quite well known for his work about personality typing and all that. And then there's Alfred Adler, the third one of the big three. And for him and his work, and I came to this very late and read a great book by two Japanese philosophers and psychologists about his work. And it all and what he put out there in the 60s was it all comes down to courage. Courage is the one important thing that's going to make a distinction in life. It's the courage to move a step forward, to face the fear, to overcome the fear, and there's a better place waiting, and the courage is what pulls me out of the fear towards something else. And I love the simplicity of that thought and how he put it into context.
Thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure as always, and I'm glad that you gave us some homework to think about. I'll look up the book on Adler by these two Japanese authors, and we put it in the show notes. Hope to see you in person very soon. And anybody who wants to know more about Michael, hook him up on LinkedIn. Go to the website. We'll put the website in the show notes as well. And what can people wake up you for? What can they call you for any day besides music? You haven't heard anything. Maybe do you have a piano in there? Keyboard?
No. And I don't have my ukulele in the office today. I usually have a ukulele around, so we're going to have to do it again.
Optional for our listeners. So let's.
Anybody can contact me anytime, and if the idea of more success with the power of people's skills resonates, then hit me up.
Okay. Thank you, Michael.